strategy and corporate development company, we believe that the mind has the potential of transforming the man from obscurity to prominence. It's the reason why we make skills our business. At Skillsmindset, we stand for change, for development and for success. We challenge, we inspire and we lead. With Skillsmindset, your limit is just the beginning. Welcome to Skillsmindset. For more information about the great service we provide, please visit our website on www.skillsmindset.com or give us a call on our UK number on 07957 676 193. Better still, send us an email on info@skillsmindset.com. Skills.
Hello, hello, hello. Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Good evening, sir. And welcome to today's Skillsmindset Masterclass. Thank you, everybody, for joining in and for people on their way as well. Thank you for joining in. This is the April Skillsmindset Masterclass. And the focus today is on building a viable business on the right side of the law. So that is our main focus for today. So I welcome you, sir, Mr. Adesile. Thank you so much for coming on board today. It's the second time, or so many times you've already on the program anyway. So
a couple of times, yes.
I think this is another time for you to host and for you to speak as well. Probably doing a multiple job at the moment. But yes, thank you so much for coming on board. So my name is Ayo, and I'll be driving tonight. And yes, I mean, tonight's focus, I mean, just do the honors. Welcome everybody on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. Welcome UK, welcome Dubai, welcome Nigeria, Ghana, every part you're joining from. We welcome you to tonight's masterclass, and we hope that is something that you would benefit from. Yes, what's this masterclass all about? Just a brief introduction into today's masterclass. We're talking about building a viable business on the right side of the law. When we look at today's market, today's life, and today's economy, I would say we operate in a regulated, I would say, regulation-driven global economy, and where building a business is no longer just about having great idea or having ideas written down. It's about building something legitimate, something resilient, something that's legally compliant. We're talking about an enterprise that can scale, without collapsing under scrutiny, because the market has become so tight now that there's a lot of scrutiny on businesses. And there are so many entrepreneurs out there who just focus on branding, social media presence, sales, social media visibility, and yet they just overlook the fundamental pillars, the foundational pillars that determine whether a business survives. Maybe the first 2 years, the first 5 years, the first 10 years, they don't focus on the legal structure, on the regulatory alignment, on the ethical governance, on the operational transparency, all the things that the government actually looks into when it comes to setting up a business that will stand and that will pass the test of time, irrespective of how fluctuating or how volatile the economy is, So tonight's masterclass, everyone, goes far beyond the basics. We've designed tonight's masterclass to challenge the assumption, like many founders carry, is going to expose the blind spots, such as when we're driving. Sometimes the driving instructor tells you while you're driving, you might be a good driver, but you need to look at your blind spots, and this will expose the things that are hiding in those blind spots that we don't see. And those are the things that can make or mar a driving test. You can either pass because of that, or you can fail. And it's kind of similar to a business as well, because those things in the blind spot that quietly destroy promising ventures, promising businesses, are the things that will be exposed tonight. So I believe tonight's masterclass will help equip each and every one of you listening with frameworks, with knowledge, with understanding, used by world-class organizations, to stay compliant while also expanding aggressively, because it's important to expand. It's important to look at those gaps in the market, to fill those gaps in the market, but doing it on the right side of the law. So I believe tonight will build a good business model, and they would expose you to ideas that are profitable, that's defensive, that's compliant from what I said earlier, and it would help you to navigate as well, the intersection between law, finance, taxation, like corporate governance. There's quite a few things to look into, and yes, that's what tonight's focus is gonna be about. So I think without speaking too much, we're not just speaking theory here tonight. We're just being practical. We're talking about real world business, talking about real world strategies, that will protect your reputation as a business owner, that will attract investors, depending on the kind of market that you're going into, that will also position your company as well, for long-term success, because that is the main reason why we set up a business in the first place anyway. So I believe by the end of this session, everyone that reads or that listens or that replays this video, I think you would have an understanding of what it truly means to build a business that is reputable, a business that stands, a business that can stand the test of time, that is not only viable, but also credible, compliant, and also globally scalable. So yeah, just moving on from all that talks. I think I'll just like to introduce you. So thank you so much for tonight. I don't have an intro for you, but I think from the little that I know about you, I'll do a short introduction. So welcome, sir, Mr. Anthony Adesile. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us tonight. And I believe, from what I know, you're internationally learned. You've learned things from global perspectives from different parts of the world. You've operated in different countries, and you're still operating in the UK at the moment. And I do believe that you're a respected expert in business viability. You train, you coach people. You've got proven success in business yourself, and you do have regulatory understanding. And when it comes to compliance and enterprise strategy, I believe you're one to go to. You do have a distinguished career, spanning more than, I don't know how many decades now, if we start looking into it. So spanning over decades, in Africa, in Europe, like you've been exposed to other parts of the world as well. And your work does speak for you, I believe that. So you've held senior roles, you've had positions of consultancy, you've sat on boards, and also you're still helping to develop new business people and new business owners, and you're helping to shape governance frameworks. And I see that in your day-to-day work. So without further ado, tonight, we know you're bringing your wealth of experience to help us understand not just how to build businesses, right, but how to build one that can stand the test of time, the test of the law, because you chose the topic, and we're talking about on the right side of the law, and we're talking scrutiny, we're talking time. So yes, without speaking further, I welcome you on board, sir. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ayo. Yeah, I mean, the purpose of this session is really to look into not just being viable in business, but being at the right side of the law, because every business has some sort of regulatory issues that they have to conform to, and it's always very important, especially when one is starting out in business, to consider all these issues before you go out and start something. When you have an idea, the temptation is there to just quickly launch into the deep, and in launching into the deep, you don't know whether you are even allowed to practice in the particular area that you want to. For example, if you want to work as if you want to set up a care business, for example, there are regulatory hurdles that you need to be aware of, and you can't start that business without you being compliant in relation to the requirements of the sector. So that's why, whenever we talk about starting a business, we look at the long term in business. Obviously, when we talk about strategy is all about how you can be consistent, how you can be futuristic, and how your business can be scalable and sustainable. It's not enough for you to just start a business today and not consider the outlook of that particular business in the next 5-10 years, for example. I will always encourage one to critically appraise the business and not just go for short-term profit and then you jump into another area of business. But let's just begin to look into what we've got today. Give me a moment. I'll just bring in the file. Give me one moment. I believe I've got.
No problem, sir.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. It's uploading. So having a viable business is important. And when we think about viable business, you look at the sector, you look at the nature of the business you want to start, and you look at whether you are competent or you have the necessary requirements to start the business. That's very important. If you don't have the requirements, then it becomes difficult for you to venture into that particular area of business. So we're going to start. Give me one moment. Yeah, here we are. So building a viable business on the right side of the law. So what do we want to accomplish here? The goal is to highlight what your business must put in place in order to remain lawful, credible, and well managed. Because like I said, every business has to be compliant to the rules and regulation of wherever you are operating. For example, most of our focus is going to be based on the United Kingdom. But I must say that the rules of business in UK is similar to the rules of business in EU, the United States, and any other part of the country, of the world. What is important is for you to know and have a good understanding of what applies in the country where you are operating your business. So the goal is to highlight what your business has to put in place in order to remain lawful. Being lawful is very important because if you do not consider that area of law, you may fall into disadvantage because, for example, in the UK, HMRC can take you on. Other regulatory bodies can take you on, and if you are found wanting, it can be damaging not only to the business but also to your own credibility. So being lawful, being credible, and having a well-managed business is very important. That's why we're looking into 4 key areas here. The first being corporate affairs, the second being compliance, the third being governance, and then the fourth being best practice. And as we explore these 4 areas, we will probably be looking into some regulatory and some regulated businesses, because it's one thing to register a business, but registering a business with the necessary corporate affairs body does not necessarily give one the permission to operate in a particular area of business. If you are working in finance, for example, you need to be regulated before you can function. If you are working, if the nature of your business is helping people to set up businesses, you need to be regulated, and you need to know the body that will regulate your business, and how you can be compliant. What are the requirements for doing the business, especially today, where one of the most important area that governments all over the world is looking into is anti-money laundering. So if the nature of your business requires scrutiny, then I'm sure that there would be a regulatory body in the country where you will be operating that will ensure that you are being compliant as you operate your business. So we will be looking into these 4 key areas, and I hope that as we continue, we will all be able to gain 1 or 2 things. So corporate affairs in business is very important because it's the foundation, is the framework or business function concerned with how a business is structured, governed, administered, and kept in good legal and organizational standing. Now, like I said, corporate affairs is enables you to have a sure foundation. Without corporate affairs, your business would just operate without any guidelines. Your business, you just do business anyhow. You probably would not have any thing written down. You would not have any structure. All that you are interested in is making money. But business is not just about making money. Business has to do with sustainability. It has to do with credibility. It has to do with your integrity as a business owner, and a lot of things. For you to be seen as credible, for you to be seen as a business with integrity, and a business that is compliant with the regulations of the country where you are operating, you need to be properly structured. So corporate affairs helps us to have an oversight of how this can be done. So it's the framework that every business needs. Notably, the role of corporate affairs is to help one build and maintain the structured foundation of the business, preserving the character and integrity of the organization. As I said earlier on, every business has a character. Every business has a USP, unique selling point. And in order to project that unique selling point, you need to be aware of the necessary wherewithal that your business needs in order to be stabilized, in order to stabilize and in order to function as it should be. So let's look at corporate affairs in perspective. What do we really mean by this foundation? What do we need to do? For example, corporate affairs provides us with a system. It's a system that helps in a business operation. It's a business that helps in validating whatever one is selling, whether you are selling a product, whether you are selling a service. There needs to be a structure, a well-grounded structure that will help drive the process. And the first thing that you need to look into is the structure of that business. So, which translates into a company. corporate structure and legal status. If you don't consider the structure of the business you want to start, is it a sole trade? Is it a partnership? Is it a limited partnership? Is it a limited liability company? All these things need to be at the foundation of the business, without which it will be difficult for you to have your long-term development. And if you start the business and you are actually making money, you will get to a particular point where you may need to now revisit this area. And in revisiting them, some things will probably have been lost along the way. So corporate affairs provides a system that centers on how companies are structured in relation to legal status also. Corporate affairs also, helps us to identify the board of directors. So, and in identifying the board, the system enables us to recognize who the directors are and what the roles of each what the role of each director will be. In a limited liability company, for example, are the directors going to have, they obviously would be shareholders in the business, and also are they going to be fully involved in the running of the business, or are they just going to be members of the shareholders and members of the board who will want to have a say in how the business is run? Corporate affairs helps us to have a structured understanding of who would who the board of directors will be, for example, and the nature of their role in the business. Also, we have the statutory records, which organizations are now required to keep. We would look more into that as we look into requirements in some areas that, for example, HMRC would require you to keep your to submit your accounts. If you are a sole trader, for example, HMRC would expect you to do your self-assessment every year. And if you are a limited liability company, then obviously you would need to also submit your accounts. So we will look into that, but what's important is the role of corporate affairs in fulfilling all of this. Like I said, is the framework, is the bedrock, is what enables a business to have a sure footing, while starting out. When you have the structure in place, then you can begin to build on the structure. So you have also, the filings and corporate housekeeping, shareholder and governance matters, maintaining proper business documentation, and supporting good governance and accountability. So it's important for us to see the value in doing these things. What if we do not have this in place? What if we take corporate affairs for granted? What if we do not have that grounding that every business requires? What will happen when corporate affairs is absent, or where it is poorly managed? Businesses are subject to some of the following. Of course, there are more, but there could be penalties and late filing consequences. For example, if a limited liability company is required to file annual accounts in the UK, for example, you need to file your accounts that's the last day in the month of March, isn't it? You need to file your accounts. If you miss that deadline, then obviously HMRC is going, no, Companies House will penalize you for late submission of your accounts, and HMRC will also begin to question that. Also, without appropriate structure that corporate affairs affords, there could be reputational damage. Let me give you an example. Health and safety. If your business, of course, every business requires risk assessment. And when you do your risk assessment, you look at the area of health and safety. For example, if your business is in construction and you do not do your due diligence, and there happens to be a problem with your health and safety process. Perhaps someone had an accident that could be avoided, and health and safety executive, HSE, gets involved. It's not just going to be you losing credibility amongst your potential customers or clients, but also that reputational damage that comes from the stringent oversight that will come from HSC would have severe impact on the business. So if there is no foundational grounding that corporate affairs would afford, part of what could happen is that reputational damage. Also, the director exposure. With director exposure, it depends on a lot of factors, because you could have a director, an investor in a business who is a director, but who would rather remain invisible, whose details would rather not be publicly disclosed. Companies House have procedures whereby that could be avoided. So, but if we do not look into all of this, we do not identify vulnerabilities, we do not identify whether someone could be in danger, maybe because of the country where the person operates, and so on and so forth, then it could lead to an unfortunate exposure. Also, we have the loss of contracts or funding opportunities, where there is reputational damage, where there is loss of credibility. Obviously, the implication will be loss of contracts or funding opportunities. So also regulator attention. Some business owners may not be aware that they have to be regulated, and they would be running their business without that regulatory oversight. And should they fall victim of regulatory oversight, and then the implication on the business would be severe. And then, of course, operational disorder. So there are lots of things that could happen if we take for granted the importance of putting together a proper structure. Whenever I advise people on starting a business, I always say that it's not just for you to start. Starting right is as important as starting your business, and that's also has to do with best practice. So how you start your business is very important, And if you consider how to start right, then you would need to critically appraise the foundation of that business, what you need to put in place, the regulations that you need to be aware of. If you need certification, for example, if you need a body that regulates you, all of these things need to be put in place. And of course, certifications, compliance also is important, and that's what we're going to be looking more into this area. Now let's look into some of the legal obligations for all businesses. Like I said, most of these obligations are applicable in every country. Every country has their corporate affairs body that that enables businesses to become corporate, that enables businesses to become legal. When a business is not registered, then it's not operating legally as it should. Even if you're a sole trader, you still need to disclose that you are a sole trader. For example, in the UK, you need to disclose to HMRC that you are self-employed, and then HMRC will have details of what you are doing. So it's important to have correct legal structure. It's also very important that you have accurate official business details. For example, if you are a limited liability company, there's a difference between your registered address and your office address. Your registered address could be your home, for example, or you could use an external body to have your address registered. So it's important to have accurate official business details. So people should know who who is registering, who are the directors, for example, what are the shares that they have in the business, what is the nature of the business, a lot of things that they need to put in perspective. So also we have the tax and financial responsibilities. All of these things, if you have someone who is starting, let me just say, for example, a lot of people today, with the I would say, with AI now, that has become the main thing that is driving businesses all over the world. You have a lot of content makers, and all these content makers, most of them would not realize that as content makers, they are business owners. And as business owners, you are not just making content, you are doing business. And if you do not see yourself as doing business, then some things that you would consider as a business would not be put in place. And so you would just be focused on, making your content, making money, but there is no long-term plan. All that you have is that immediate gratification and excitement that comes with making money through the platform. So it's important, to consider all of these things, and it's an obligation for every business to recognize that whether you like it or not, if you are running a business, you pay tax. And if you pay tax, then you need to have record of what you are making, your outgoings, and your income. So also record keeping. Record keeping is not just good business sense. It's also it keeps you grounded. You are able to look at where you started from. You are able to track what you have accomplished. You are also able to review and see what needs to be done. Are there any failings? Are there anything that you need to review and things like that? So all these things are important, and we are looking into the legal aspects of this. And if we're looking into the legal aspect of this, then we know that at the forefront of this is the government that is looking at what you are doing. In the UK, for example, people exchange money, which of course is business. But with the way UK is regulated today, there is a level of, there is a certain amount of money that you deposit in the bank, or that someone sends into your bank account, that we immediately, require, the bank to want to know the source of the money, what you are doing, that's brought in that kind of money. And part of all this is because of the anti-money laundering. And
yeah, I was going to say that anti-money laundering.
Yeah. So that's why it's good for you to keep record. It's good for you to be compliant with regards to everything that you do. So if you are not doing the right business, or more or less, if your business is not legal, and the bank, for example, flags the money that comes into your account as potential anti-money laundering, money or funding, then you would need you have some explanation to make. And if the source of that money is outside of the law of the country where you are operating, then you put yourself in legal jeopardy there. So legal, for every business, legal obligations are, they are guidelines. They also helps in the structure of the business. And if you look at how you structure all of these things, you will find that all these requirements help you as a business to be much more disciplined in the way you operate. Some of the things that you would have taken for granted without these legal obligations, you are forced to begin to critically look into them, and you want to see that you are compliant. So
yes.
It forces you to critically appraise the nature of your business, to understand where you are doing it right, where you're not doing it right, what you need to do, and so on and so forth. Also, there is the employment compliance, where relevant. If you are a business and you want to employ someone, you need to do your due diligence to recognize or to know whether that person that you are employing is able to work, in the country where you are operating. If that person is if that person does not have a work permit, for example, and you employ him or her, then that's a legal jeopardy for you, and a lot of fine from HMRC with regards to
I
that.
think
So
about
employment compliance.
10,000 pounds. Mm.
Sorry.
No, I said.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it could.
am I muted? Yeah, okay, I'm unmuted. Yeah, I was thinking it was about £10,000 for each person
Yeah,
that works for you that's not legally permitted to work or doesn't have the right papers and creds. So
yeah, and it could rise. It could rise beyond that. So
uh,
yeah, that's why compliance is important. You know, and corporate affairs, helps us to be aware of some of these obligations. And then there is the data protection responsibilities. If you're handling data, how you handle people's data is important. Not just in the UK, it's all over the world. GDPR is important for you to ensure that uh, people's data in your hand, um, you know, does not fall into wrong hands. And also, you as a business must ensure that you do not abuse the data that you have with you. So yeah. Also, the sector-specific rules where applicable. We're talking about lawyers, for example. In order to practice law, you have to be regulated under by the Law Society. Accountants, you have to be a chartered accountant and be regulated by an accountancy body like ACCA. So it goes on like that. So there are sector-specific rules that guide the way some businesses operate. We are not looking, we wouldn't have time for to look into regulated bodies. I mean, regulated bodies and regulated businesses. But we will, one way or the other, still mention them. So, legal business foundation and compliance. What I want to highlight here is the difference between running a business and running a compliance business. We've been talking about it. Being on the right side of the law means that you have to run a compliance business. Your business has to be within legal um, within legal boundaries, not outside of that. For example, I'll just give an example of those companies whose line of business is registering companies with Companies House. Now, in time past, you can say that you are starting a business helping people to register their companies. But today, it's no longer possible. HMRC, and I must say, the government of UK, for example, requires that if you are going to be involved in registering companies for people, you cannot start the business without obtaining the necessary regulatory certification. Okay, so if I decide that I want to start that line of business and I start registering companies on behalf of clients without having HMRC as the regulatory oversight, I will be breaking the law. All right. And so there are other businesses like that that would require regulatory oversight. So what you find is that it's not just enough to register a company, you can register a business, but not be able to function in that line of business because of regulatory requirements. So it's important for us to recognize that there is a difference between running a business and running a compliance business. So a compliance business is a business that operates within legal boundaries. So one is informal, and the other, which is the latter, is principled and relies on due process. Due process is what makes a business compliant. Due process is also best practice. And so a compliant business is one that is lawful and recognizes the need for structure, the need for record keeping, the need for discipline, without which one may fall on the wrong side of the law, because you may not know, know whether you are breaking the law. Let's look into, let me see if, oh yes, so let's look into legal foundations, and then we will spend some time with this business legal identity. Is your business a sole trader? Is it a partnership? Is it a limited company? So obviously, I've said earlier on that a sole trader is a self-employed individual that is in the UK. In any other country, it may be different, but anyone that is not formally registered as a corporate entity will be operating as a sole trader. And if you are operating as a sole trader in whatever country you are operating in, you are still required to pay your tax. You are required to keep record of what is coming in and what is going out. And at the end of the day, you would be required to balance your books in order to pay the appropriate tax. But the problem with sole trader is that you are self-employed and you are personally liable should there be any liabilities. If let's say, for example, in the process of operating your kind of business, you are not properly insured and someone sues you for negligence, you cannot say you can't pay, or you are not personally responsible. If you are operating as a sole trader, you will be personally liable. Also, partnership. With partnership, we have partnerships and we have limited partnership in the UK. But obviously, partnership has to do with two or more people coming together to operate a business without legal structure. That is, without being a limited company. But they are still protected. They are still protected. But it's not different from a sole trader. It's not different from a sole trader. The same applies to limited partnership. My understanding of limited partnership is where you have one person who has who is a general partner, and others who are just partners. And what that means is that the person who is a general partner is the one running the business, is the one who owns the business, and other partners are just investors in the business. So as investors in the business, they are not involved in day-to-day running of the business. They are just partners because they invest in the business. But the general partner is the main person running the business. So he or she, just like the sole trader, is personally liable because it's not protected. The business is not protected because the person running the business is also the business, more so to say. So that's partnership. But where there is liability, investors in partnership will not be liable. More or less, those who are limited partners will not be liable for anything in the business. But the general partner will be liable because he is involved in running the business. But where you have one of the investors becoming involved in the running of the business, then that person also has become involved and also will be liable. So we now come to limited liability company, which I always encourage because it's an entity on its own. If you have a business and it's a limited liability company, then you know that, like I said, is separate from yourself. So any liability is on the company, not on the shareholders. Of course, we know that with limited liability companies, you have shareholders who are directors in the business. But each of the directors in the business they are not personally liable to whatever happens to the business. That's why it's limited liability. So, and that's important to know. But as a limited liability business, there are rules and regulations, there are procedures that not only protects the shareholders, but also protects those that they will be serving, whether the nature of their business is products or services. So anyone who has a limited liability company must recognize that they have to operate within legal boundaries that would have been the corporate affairs, that is the government body, would have put in place. In the UK, it's Companies House that is responsible for registering companies. In Nigeria, I believe it's Corporate Affairs, isn't it? Corporate Affairs Commission. So every country is unique, but it's the same practice in all over the world when it comes to limited liability businesses. So, well, our focus is on legal foundations. And so if you are running a limited liability company, there are, you are now, you are bound by the law because you register with the governing body to operate a business. Okay.
So thank you so much for that, sir. So just before you move forward, just for the sake of recap, I'm just flashing this question. So what would you say is the key difference between a limited partner and a partner running a limited liability company?
Right. With limited liability company, there are clear indication of who owns what in the business. So everyone identified as investor in a limited liability company is a shareholder. All right. And they are guided by the company's article of memorandum and association. Okay. So that's what they are guided by. Obviously, the body responsible for registering limited liability companies, they'll have their own documents. If you don't want to prepare your own documents, they have their own article of association, an article of memorandum and association. Okay. So so if you are registering a business, you can use the default document.
Right.
But if you want to prepare your own article of memorandum and article of association, then you would have to prepare it and submit it on record. So that becomes the document that guides the way you operate business. Next is the shareholders. All right. So with the shareholders, that's where you decide. Let's say you have 100 shares. How do you want to divest the shares? If there are 4 people, for example, are you doing 25%, or is someone getting 30%, another getting 30%, and 2 others getting 20-20? So it depends on what the shareholders or directors agree on together, the nature of their investment in the business. So, but once it is put on record, then it becomes the legal document that binds them. All right. Saying this, you will find in part of the legal foundation, I mentioned PSC. PSC transparency requirements, or what PSC stands for is a person with significant control. So in a limited liability company, Companies House in the UK wants to know who is the person who is or are persons with significant control. All right.
Shares wise, right? Is that relating to shares?
Not necessarily. It would relate to the nature of the person's influence in the business.
Okay.
All right. So
yes,
they can have 25% each in the business, but we are looking at four shareholders now. So, but one of them could have the influence, a greater influence in the business. Maybe that person becomes the managing director that is in charge of the business. All right. So that person will be regarded as the person with significant control. So that person, for example, can make some decisions without consulting others. It depends on what is agreed in the article of association. All right, but persons with significant control is critical. Company House introduced this some years back now, and it has become a requirement. You've got to disclose to Companies House when you are doing your confirmation statements, which is confirmation statement is one of your legal requirements as a limited liability company. Every year, you've got to disclose what we call confirmation statement. You've got to complete that in addition to company accounts. So, so when completing the confirmation statement, there is that part where you have to identify the person or persons with significant control. All right. So legal foundations. Did I answer your question there?
Yes, sir. You answered the question. You answered it.
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. Okay. So that's in a limited liability company. So also we have the registered office and registered email requirements. I mentioned that earlier. Registered office is different from the operational office. All right. So you can have a business operating in, let's say, in the UK, for example, you can have a business operating somewhere in London. There's a particular address where the business operates in, where employees go, where every business is done. That place may not necessarily be the registered address for the business. Okay, so registered office is different from registered different from operational office. Okay, now you also have registered email requirements. If Companies House want to get in touch, what's the official email that's they use, that is the company uses as a contact? Then we have the director's responsibilities. I've mentioned the article of association, which will spell out the responsibilities and or who the director will be. Of course, every shareholder is a director. Okay, every shareholder is a director, and all directors within the limited liability company will be expected to convene meetings, and obviously the company will be required to keep record. So when we are talking about corporate affairs, this is where where the discipline comes in. All right. Directors convening meeting, there's a record of the meeting, it's filed somewhere, the decisions made during the meeting, follow up and everything. So you have record that shows all of this. And then you've got the company details, keeping company details accurate. Then the confirmation statement requirement, which I mentioned earlier on. The confirmation statement is what helps, is what Companies House put in place to ensure transparent information, to ensure that all the necessary information about the company is properly put in place. So there is also, so that's where the transparency also comes in. And then the Companies House filing obligations. What do we mean by the filing obligations? Like I said, in the UK, you are expected to file your annual accounts. Company House expects your annual accounts filed by the last day of the month of March. If it's not filed by the last day of the month of March, then that's business will be penalized, would be required to pay a certain amount of money. And if it's
Penalties.
done, if it's repeated another year, the cost goes up. So penalties, like I said, corporate affairs, a proper structure helps us to avoid all these penalties, because if one fails to disclose information, so it's not just sufficient to disclose required information, it's important to disclose it as at when due. So if it's not disclosed when due, then there will be implications, financial
That's right.
penalties, for example. And it could also, with confirmation statements and even accounts, if companies house has written to you, to the business, about late filings, and they have not received feedback for a certain period of time, the company could be struck off, could be dissolved. So, which means that if the company is operating business and is making profit, but has failed to meet the legal requirements, before the company knows it, that company could be dissolved. So businesses need to be aware of that. And then there is the identity verification developments for directors and person with significant control. Now, this began last year, identity verification. This is where Companies House requires every director to be verified. And once you are verified, Companies House will give you your own personal code. The personal code that identifies the person as a director in the company. So verification is important. I think you can only do, if you are a director in multiple companies, one verification is all that you need. And once you have done the verification, then you can then disclose the companies where you are a director. So if you are in two or more companies, for example, if you are a director in more than one company, then you have to disclose those companies, and Companies House will be able to link your verification code to all the companies where you are operating as a director. Now we go to corporate governance and best practice. We talk about corporate affairs, but who drives it? Governance is best seen as the corporate oversight that looks beyond minimum legal, operational, and business standards to effect a business-wide best practice that protects the business from liabilities and secures the business as safe, sustainable, and forward-looking. In essence, when we talk about governance, we are talking about leadership oversight. We are talking about the structure that ensures that necessary obligations are identified, and not only identified, proper structure is put in place to ensure that every legal requirements are followed. So governance, corporate governance, you know, ensures that at least there is that um, minimum fulfillment of required obligations. All right. However, I said at some point that you know, the legal, the regulations, the policies and procedures, or you know, all the regulations, you know, that evolve around you know, businesses. Um, it's it's in a way it's in a way good for businesses because it enables them to put together a proper structure. Okay. But the least that businesses could do is to put in place the minimum that we ensure that every legal requirements um, are fulfilled.
Satisfied.
Okay.
Yeah.
Satisfied. Right. So corporate governance ensures that this is done. Okay. However, when we now talk about best practice, okay, best practice goes beyond the minimum. Okay, that's why best practice is the bridge between legal duty and business credibility. So best practice, let's look at health and safety requirements that I mentioned earlier on. Let's say government requires, the regulatory body requires these, you know, obviously every company is expected to fulfill the minimum health and safety requirements on their premises. All right. However, best practice, and of course, it's leadership that drives best practice. And that's where corporate governance, like I said, corporate governance starts with the minimum, okay? But leadership that govern how the business, you know, is structured may decide to go beyond the minimum standard requirements to look at, okay, how can we guarantee better safety for our employees?
Right.
What more can we do to ensure that there is zero accidents on the premises? Okay, so that's where you know, when businesses go the extra mile, when they are known, you know, for certain standard that are above the norm, then you know that the credibility of that business will increase. People will want to do business with the company, and of course, the employees within the organization, knowing that leadership cares more about them, would want to give more.
That's right.
Right? So best practice is the bridge between legal duty and business credibility. And it's important as a corporate body or as a business to not just see the legal requirements and do the barest minimum. When we are looking at the structure, because you are looking at a sustainable business, you are looking at you are looking at a long term, a business with a long term, plan. then
Yes.
you have to put in place the kind of practice that will ensure that longevity and
Yes.
sustainability. And of course, as that business grows, the integrity, the culture within the business will increase, will be beneficial to everyone. And
Mm.
obviously, it's it increases the organization's profitability. So that's where corporate governance stands. So good governance is good business, and good, so it enables clarity of roles. So where you have a leadership that wants that is interested in putting in place proper structure, procedures, and everything. So there is clarity of roles.
That's right.
Because good governance enables better compliance. All right. So we're still coming to compliance, but where you have compliance, you can't have better compliance if there is no clarity of roles. Who is doing what? Who is responsible for this and that? So there has to be clarity of roles, and good governance, makes that happen. Clear authority and responsibility. Um, documented decisions. I talked earlier on about directors convening meeting and discussing way forward for the business. They look into the operation of the business. They look into profitability. They look into strategy and so on and so forth. But the long short of it is how is geared towards how they can take the business further. So in doing that, so imagine a situation where these meetings take place and there is no documented record of the meeting. So there is nothing that spells out the decisions made and so on and so forth. So good governance ensures that this is put in place. Documented
Mm.
decisions, oversight of risk. Good governance is always looking at risk assessments. In assessing the risk, you are looking at how you can reduce risk as much as
Mm.
possible. Accountability for deadlines and obligations, and then you've got the periodic review. You're
Mm.
always reviewing and assessing how things go. So we go to compliance. You know, as we have said earlier, corporate affairs is the structure. It provides that structure. All right. Compliance refers to the efficient and consistent implementation of legal and business practice, delivering outcomes and obligations as expected and within required time. So compliance is about fulfilling the law. Okay. Compliance is about making sure, corporate affairs provides the structure. Okay. But without the process that drives compliance, without spelling out how the structure will produce results, um, then there will be a problem. So compliance, ensures the implementation. So it's the function concerned with ensuring the business obeys applicable laws, regulations, standards, policies, and internal controls. So you have the person in charge of compliance, for example. So, for example, we have been using um, health and safety as our example. So, in a particular organization, there will be someone who is responsible for health and safety, within the organization. So that person will be the go-to person. So that person, who is the who is who is the oversight on health and safety, will ensure proper compliance when it comes to health and safety. So that person has responsibility. So um, compliance enables that function, to be properly followed, so there is that easy flow of who is keeping record, who is looking into the different areas, ensuring that all the requirements are being met and so on. So it's important to appreciate the value of compliance. Where there is no compliance, then most things there will be failings. So
Fall
compliance
apart.
ensures. Sorry.
So things might fall apart.
Sure, yeah. So compliance ensures a process that focuses on meeting legal and regulatory requirements, for example. So the structure might be there. So we may know that, right, we have to file accounts by end of March. All right. Um, how do we file account by end of March? Who is responsible for making sure we file the accounts by end of March? So compliance ensures a process that focuses on meeting legal and regulatory requirements. So whoever is responsible, for filing accounts, um, there would be an oversight, for example, whereby someone is responsible for making sure that the deadline is met, account is properly filed, okay, and filed at the right time. I said properly filed because if years ago, obviously things evolve in the UK. There used to be a time where small businesses and non-profit organizations will just file accounts. Maybe you have your spreadsheets and you do, you you have the record and everything, and you submit it to company's house. Company house will approve it, and that's it for the year. Okay. And I was doing that for a particular non-profit organization. I've been doing that for some years, but on this particular year, company's house had changed the rules. So they no longer accept that kind of accounts.
Right.
All right. So I submitted the accounts by the due date. All right. Hoping that that will be it. But then I got a letter from company's house that the accounts was wrongly filed. We would need to submit this kind of account going forward. So we had to file the right accounts there and then. So having filed the accounts, I expected that would be the end of it. The next thing we received was a fine, penalty for late filing. All right. So that's why I said it's not just enough to file the account. It has to be the required account, just as any other legal obligations.
That's right.
It's not just for you to meet the timing. You've got to do what is required. Okay, compliance ensures that this is properly done. So meeting legal and regulatory requirements, and then there is the monitoring obligations, preventing breaches, building controls and checks, policy adherence, risk management in regulated areas, and responding to regulatory expectations. I'm just fast forwarding so that we can conclude. And then, so yeah. So when compliance fails, most compliance failings are not intentional, but due to negligence or weak systems. This is where, for example, nobody owns compliance. Everyone expects that someone will do the work and nobody gets to do it. All right. So deadlines are not tracked. Records are incomplete. Roles are unclear. Approvals are assumed, not checked. Policies exist but are not followed. Issues are dealt with too late. These are, compliance failings. So, but a proper structure, like we said, corporate affairs ensures a proper framework that guides the process. And after, governance has put in place the kind of the kind of best practice required by the organization. So then we have the compliance, the fulfillment of those policies, the fulfillment of the roles, and so on and so forth. So that's what compliance does. So finally, good, being on the right side of the law is good for business. It's not just about being compliant. It is in fact good for business. And a properly structured business will keep your business properly organized and properly run, and is for the good of the organization. When you are properly structured, there is an easy flow of process, as against just operating in a chaotic manner. So also following diligent compliance protocols will keep your business lawful and within rules. And finally, best practice validates the integrity of your business and allows for a better run business. I believe that's it for the presentation. Over to you, Aya. Aya. So there's a break there. Hello? Hello? We're having a bit of problem there.
Hello, sir.
Oh, hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, yeah, I've been speaking. I'm not sure what's happened. I think something probably went
Yeah,
wrong with the device microphone. I was going to say thank you so much for that session. I mean, it's very educative. I've been, I've taken a thing or two away myself from that. And I see my video is frozen. Oh my goodness, what a night. I mean, it's been interesting learning a thing or two from that. So thank you so much for that session. And thank you so much for the nuggets that you've passed as well. I think it's quite robust teaching. And I would call it like a lecture stroke or masterclass about how people should go about setting up business properly and how people should go about
Mm.
being on the right side of the law. So I think there is a lot to learn from this, and I think it will be good for us.
Something something wrong from your
But you
side
can
there.
hear
I
it.
think it's the audio. Okay, yeah, you're back,
That's fine.
and your
I
video is
think,
frozen.
yeah, I'm not sure what's happened to my data tonight, but well, it seems
Yeah.
I think I'm in a part of the world where there is network issues. There's been network issues all day in
All
Southend,
right.
but we hope they're able to resolve it. I'm about to restart the internet router about two, three times already. But in the absence of that, I just want to say thank you so much, sir. And
You're welcome.
I think as we bring this session to a close, I'd like to remind each and every one of us of one of the things you have taught us, which is quite fundamental. That every great business is built in the mind, is built through clarity, is built through intention, and in the real world, we need to just make sure we're on the on the good side of the law, because that ensures smooth running for longevity, impacts going concern positively, and it helps us to to scale as well without thinking about closure, without thinking about government interference and the likes of all that. So yes, thank you so much. So for each and every of our listeners out there, for each and every of our watchers out there, for people that have been listening to this stream, like you now have the insight and frameworks and awareness to build with confidence a business that will scale, a business that will last a long time. So as Dr. Anthony Adesile has taught us a lot tonight, use everything you've been taught, protect your ideas, strengthen your systems that you put in the place you work, and do everything possible to keep the business going. Remember, the most successful entrepreneurs, they're not necessarily the ones that move the fastest, they are the ones that move the smartest, if that makes sense. They might not be moving the fastest, but they're moving the smartest because they've got the right strategy, they've got the right compliance in place, they are purpose driven, and that purpose is guiding their every step. So if you apply what you've learned today, I can tell you that your business will not only grow, but it will endure, it will expand, and it will command respect in the market, whatever market that you are in. So thank you so much for your engagement tonight, for listening. Thank you for your curiosity. We had a few questions, but that was answered in the process of the masterclass. And as you keep doing your business right in the right way, I believe the profits will start coming in eventually. So stay focused and don't give up on that business idea you've got coming up. Just make sure you're on the right side of the boat. So while is it so? Do you have any one or two things, any few nuggets for people out there before we bring this to a close?
Um, I just want to say that you know it's always good to start right. When we want to start a business, don't just rush into the business without understanding um, the requirements of the business. And that's why, business plan is important. When you have a business plan, you can't have a business plan without doing a research, without trying to understand the nature of the business, without doing your analysis, market analysis, and so on and so forth. And also, when you are planning your business plan, what you have is a situation where um, you will be exploring all the areas that do matter for your potential business. So yes, do be mindful that starting right is very, very important than to just start because you want to make quick money and then having failed in that business, you then be looking into wanting to start another one. Yeah. So yeah, do make sure that you plan your business, and you understand the nature of the business, the requirements of the business, whether you need to be regulated, whether you need certification, whatever you need before you can venture into the business. It's important that you have all of that in place. Yeah. Hiya.
It's been an eventful one, and I'm sure we've taken a thing or two away from what the nuggets has been shared. So until next time, stay focused, keep it going. Don't forget, the fast test does not always win, but the smart test usually does. So keep focusing that business idea of yours and keep staying right side of the road. So we'll meet again. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, GB from Nigeria. Thank you for people. Thank you to people listening from the UK. Thank you to people listening from different parts of the world. We appreciate you. We thank you so much. We would like to encourage you to subscribe to our social media platforms, to Skillsmindset if you go on www.skillsmindset.com. There you see all our social media handles on Instagram, on Twitter, LinkedIn, uh, what's it called, our Hex. So just go on there and you will subscribe to our social media channel. The purpose for subscription, you already know, is for you to keep in touch with us and also to keep abreast of all the information that we share out there, and all the updates is coming about masterclass, about programs, about businesses that we're launching, about new training courses, new business ideas that we're putting out there. So make sure you don't miss out, and make sure you keep following us. Until the next month, thank you so much, and have a good night. Thank you so much, Dr. Anthony Adesile. We appreciate you. It was having you on board. And apologies again, once again, for my internet connectivity, my my data issues today. But yes, hopefully by next month we'll be running fully on all cylinders without issues. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
everyone, and have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Have a good night.